practically pastoring will not tell you to tough it out. You should just leave.
The reason why that's a statistic is because 18 months is right about 3 or 4 months after the honeymoon ended.
Loyalty's not always your friend.
Welcome back to the Practically Pastoring Podcast. My name is Frank, and I'm glad that you are here. The whole gang is here. We got two really good questions.
And maybe a third that's just okay.
Yeah, we might not get to the third, but one question's about feeling guilty about leaving their church. The other question is about policy when it comes to purchasing expensive items, and we'll see if we get to the third question. But before we do that, I want to introduce everybody. My name is Frank. I'm here in Central Florida. Up in Baltimore, Maryland, we got Jeffrey Simpson.
Howdy.
Down in Sumter, South Carolina, with the brand new AirPod Maxes, we got Delmar Pete.
Yeah. Good to see you.
Next to me in the sanctuary of the Lord of Safety Harbor Community Church, Safety Harbor Presbyterian LLC, we got Andrew Larson.
I mean, if you truly knew our history, you would know that that's definitely not us. But
You
that's
weren't
another
going to go.
story
Why
for-
didn't you go Reverend Doctor? Come on.
I mean, that's true.
Did it start as a Presbyterian church?
So our congregation left a Presbyterian church
That's what I thought.
way before I got here. But hey, everybody.
And Timothy Miller.
Hey.
All right, guys. Before we dive in, Delmar, can you tell everybody about the amazing organization called Church Merch?
Oh, you're talking about church merch? The thing
what I'm
that
talking
our
about.
entire church just left everything to join up with. Yeah, church merch is awesome.
What did you order?
What now? Did you leave
Like
your denomination? I don't
No,
understand.
our church
Left
just
a wife. It was crazy.
we left everything, y'all. We abandoned what we knew. No, we took all of our branding stuff and we realized we can purchase pretty much everything through church merch. So now our shirts are coming through them, our welcome bags and all the kits and everything's coming through them. When we have retreats, when we have student camps, when we have things, we just can all order it from one place, and it's super nice. And not to mention, the people who work out there are amazing. I got to during the Practically Pastoring Conference, got to know them pretty good. And I would just encourage you, check them out. Frank, what's the link for that? Because it's Promotions Guy, right?
Promotionsguy.com/church merch. The link will be in the description.
It is super worth it. And right now, I'm actually wearing a church merch shirt under this shirt because it's so soft. I know there are other companies who brag about super soft shirts. Well, they got good rivals. Now, this is the AEW to their WWE. Okay, you need to check them out.
But does Church Merch make youth devotionals? That's the question.
Hey, we don't have to talk about other companies. We can just talk about the great organization called Church
Jeff,
Merch.
as someone who was once blacklisted,
yes,
tell
we
you,
were.
We love AEW and WWE if we're going to continue
Yes,
this
we do.
illustration.
Yes, we do.
But we are going to thank Church Merch for their sponsorship, and we're going to dive into this question. All right, guys. This is from Reddit. This says, I've been serving as a youth pastor at my church for the past year and a half. While I love students and the congregation, I have conflicted with the leadership for the past 7 months, a situation I don't want to share on the internet, and things have only been worsening. Last month, the executive pastor, not the senior pastor, told me he felt that I wasn't a fit for their church, and I agreed. He has not told the lead pastor about our conversation yet, but now I feel guilty about leaving. I have sought counsel from other pastors outside of our community, and they all think I should leave. But when I read articles about leaving, they all talk about toughing it out. I've tried to resolve this conflict multiple times, but every time it just worsens. What do I do? Before anyone talks, Practically Pastoring will not tell you to tough it out. You should just leave. Our response almost to all these type of questions is like, get out of there, dude. Like, run away, update your resume on Canva, and jet out of there. But I mean, like, I think this is all very contextual.
call Matt Steen.
Call Matt Steen.
Hey, honestly.
We love chemistry staffing. We should really work out some kind of a sponsorship
should,
deal
yeah.
because we talk about chemistry staffing
Almost like every other episode.
all the time.
And also like offline.
Our group chat is always like, ooh, that guy needs to call Matt Steen.
Literally, we just talked about that like a couple days ago. Yeah, brother, like, man, if you already have a conversation with someone who's in authority above you, that they don't think you're a good fit and you've agreed to this, get out of there. Like,
I mean, the executive
there's no
pastor
point.
ain't leaving. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
It's
Right.
going to be you, buddy. And
Yeah.
you'd much rather resign or get called somewhere else than get fired.
You know,
And you might be feeling that tension because you literally have been there for a year and a half, and the statistics is like 18 months is the average youth pastor. I get it. I get you don't want to be a statistic, but like if you're married, your marriage, your family, your own health is more important than not being a statistic in this situation. Does that make sense?
The reason why that's a statistic is because 18 months is right about 3 or 4 months after the honeymoon ended of you being on staff there.
That's true.
Everything was great.
Or
Everyone was
7
on their
months after in
yeah,
this situation.
yeah, exactly. It's like about a year in is when you're not the new guy anymore. You're just there, and all the normal, real stuff starts to really. All the things that you in your interview were like, it's probably not going to be that bad. They start really grinding on you, especially if that's like, leadership issues or philosophy of ministry issues. That's when it starts to really bother you, and or you bother other people under your leadership, and people are not giving you a chance anymore as the new guy. You're just on staff now. So that's why that stat, I think that's a big reason why that stat is that length of time.
But
Another reason that stat exists is because you have people that want to be in charge and cannot sit under the authority that God has placed over them or that they have willingly placed over themselves. When you got hired at this church, the leadership
True.
structure was already intact. I'm assuming that executive pastor was there, and I'm assuming that senior pastor was there. And so you willfully placed yourself under their authority. Not every situation do you get to choose who is in authority over you, but in this situation you did. And if you can no longer sit under their authority, you can't be there. That's what it is. It's either you submit to the authority that God has in place at that church, or you leave that church, because you don't get to change what the authority is that's already been established.
I think one of the things Jeff was hitting on was pretty right. That's actually where I was. Some of the reason there's an 18-month turnover on student pastors is because student pastors run out of their old sermons, and they don't, they've had all the intro conversations with the students.
That's funny.
But some of it's because it's on the church. The average American church has wired its own self so that it can only keep a student pastor for 18 months. And that's a sad conversation. And if you're set on going, okay, well, then you're set on going. But I'm always a fan of, hey, church discipline and working through conflict specifically. There's a lot of opportunity for growth there. Like if there's some big things that you've talked to this important person about, the executive pastor, if y'all are on good terms, I mean, because we don't have any of the context of how he told you he didn't think you were fit. Was that aggressively? Sometimes executive pastors, man, I hope he's not like this. Sometimes they can be a little like manipulative and try to like gaslight you into thinking something. I would try to have another conversation with him and say, hey, you said you didn't think I was called this. Can you give me some specific examples why? Not so you could get beat up, but for a growth opportunity for you. And because a great way to absolve guilt is to give it everything you got before you leave. If you're like, I exhausted this pipeline, I went to this conversation, I had this conversation, I did these things, and then I left, it's not going to be on you because you tried to do it. You tried to reform yourself or either the context of what you're going on. So I would just encourage you, my biggest encouragement is before you just jet and leave, for your own conscience, for your own, everything, lean into it one good time so you can know, hey, I did try to do this.
I would say you've done a lot of good things, maybe in the right order. Some difficult conversations. You've tried to resolve the conflict. You sought outside counsel. I mean, these are things I would have done, and probably in that order. And then you had the conversation with the executive pastor, and you said you both agreed, not a good fit. I'm sorry about the guilt. I don't think the guilt is a bad thing. I think you could maybe reframe that a little bit. The guilt might be because you love your students in your congregation. That's a good thing. Like, you should care about your students in your congregation. But I would also see this as an opportunity to care for them even further, because the next guy that God has in store for this ministry might be an even better fit, and you kind of paved the way for that. So this could be a really sweet opportunity for you. I think there's a lot of good advice here. I do think a conversation would need to be had with the lead pastor. He should not be in the dark through this whole thing at all. And it sounds like you're already praying through next steps and what that could look like. Having a plan in place would probably be really, really wise at this stage in the game as well. So I think you're working through the right steps. Sorry, it's such a tough season. I will say we've all been through tough seasons. We would never say tough it out. I think we're going to go through periods where it's going to be harder than other times for sure. And yeah, we will have to withstand some of those challenges. But when it comes to this point, and you've already had these really difficult conversations, and to me, like the agreement that this is not a good fit between you and the executive pastor, that kind of seals it in my mind. And I could be wrong there, but it sounds like you guys are both on the same page.
I think you are coming up to a very precarious point of the calendar. It is the middle of March when this episode is airing, which means that you've got spring break probably starting in about a week or so, and then you've got a sprint to the end of the school year, and then it's summer. And in youth ministry, churches need to have their youth ministry staff in place over the summer. So maybe what this is you say to the senior pastor, the elders, the executive pastor, hey, I realize that I am not a long-term fit. Here's what we have planned. You don't have the next person in line. I don't have the next thing lined up. I understand that it's probably not healthy for me to be here long-term. Can we get through the summer? Can we get the kids to camp? Can we go on the mission trip? And then I will transition off without making a big fuss and without making a big noise and try to paint the church in the best light as I'm leaving. But
Dude,
then,
as a lead pastor, that would mean so much to me.
but
Like,
then you will
establishing
not
that healthy timeline.
But you will also then not be in the lurch by the executive pastor having to take kids to camp where everybody has a bad time.
I love that.
So,
But also,
maybe that's the
church,
conversation
just
we need
understand
to
I
have.
might need to go do an interview or two.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
during
give,
that time.
give me the freedom, because hopefully August 1st I'm starting somewhere else. And also, if that's not the case, remember that I'm doing this for you, and there might need to be a couple months of severance as a bridge to make that happen, because I could have jumped in when another church wanted me to start June 1st so I could take their kids to camp and go on that mission trip.
Yeah, or I
But
could
because-
just not tell you I'm interviewing somewhere and this, hey, by the way, this is 2 weeks notice.
Also,
which is way
there's a good
short for a
chance
church.
that if you are trying to do it the right way, you might go to the elders and say, here's the plan. And they say, no, we don't want someone who's got one foot out the door. See ya. So
That's okay too.
there's that risk as well. And if that's the case, I would say trust that God is faithful and that he is sovereign. Do what you can do and what you think you should do. But if you can no longer submit to the authority that God has placed over you, you need to start looking for the exit strategy.
And I would say, too, if all of that sounds overwhelming, just in your mind decide, I'm just going to do the next right thing. That's all you
good.
got to just
Frozen 2, baby.
Yeah, what's the next right
Wasn't that
thing
good?
for me to do? I didn't even know that was a
Yeah,
reference.
but that song was a banger.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
from Frozen 2. But
Okay.
but
Well,
even
anyway.
beyond that, it's still it's a true statement.
Yeah, just do the next right thing, whatever that is, and then don't worry about the rest. Let God handle that.
Yeah. I was gonna say the same thing, like give that long runway, but there's a reality that they might say, that's sweet, you're out in a month. And if they do that, ask for severance and then get out of there.
And if they do that, that was confirmation that is not the kind of culture you want to be part of.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. The one last thing, obviously, and there's probably wisdom in this. You didn't share what the conflict was, but understand that conflict that you're experiencing might be at other churches too. Does that make sense? Like, I left the church and I was like, oh, I don't like the fact that this lead pastor is trying to control the entire church and surround himself with a bunch of yes man elders. And then I went to another church of a senior pastor who controlled everything and surrounded himself with a bunch of yes men pastors. And the only difference is that the other church stopped it. You know what I'm saying? The elders didn't allow themselves to be yes men. And so those conflicts that you find yourself in may be in churches that you might be stepping into when you go to the next one. But one key thing that you should take from this, as Andrew said, as we're all saying, right now, go to chemistrystaffing.com and look up Matt Steen, tell him Practically Pastoring sent you, and maybe we get a commission check because we've sent
That'd be great.
30
Hey.
pastors over there. Matt Steen is a rock star. He will gladly
It's
help you.
definitely worth having a conversation with someone whose ministry is connecting pastors to the right churches.
I was in a church, as y'all know, and I took my stuff to Matt Steen, and he nailed my timeline within like 2 months.
Wow.
So we're not doing this just as like a funny gag. It is good and it is wise, and I think it is holy to know people who understand this complex stuff. And by him kind of giving me that rough timeline, I was able to start positioning my own life. So when I left the church that I was in, it was very good for our family. It could have been different, but it was good. And thank you, Matt, if you're listening.
And this is for everybody. When you're looking for a church position and you use an organization like chemistry staffing, it costs you nothing. The way these organizations make money is the church that's hiring pays, I think it's like a monthly fee or a one-time fee to the organization to hire that person. So it costs you nothing, but you also benefit from this experience. You get to go through the process of interviewing. You get through the process of having someone else look at your resume. They might even have you do some sort of personality tests or some surveys, like theological surveys and stuff like that. And it will better you as a candidate and as a pastor because of that. So there was a time where I went through a similar organization to look for a job when I was leaving Arkansas before I went to Milwaukee. And I ended up finding my job in Milwaukee on churchstaffing.com. But because I put my name in the hat of that organization, I got to interview with 2 churches. And I learned a lot about my resume. I learned a lot about how I interview. I learned a lot about that because that was the first time I was interviewing with churches that weren't like super small churches. And I was like, oh, like, this is where I need to improve on. And that organization gave me feedback. They would say like, hey, when you interviewed, they said this about you. You seemed wounded by this. You seemed insecure about that, or whatever the case may be. And then when I found Epicos on churchstaffing.com and I interviewed, like I was able to interview better. And so anyways, it doesn't hurt to go through the process.
One caveat to that, if you're on church staffing or whatever job site, and you see that a church is being represented by Vanderbloom and chemistry, whatever, Shepherd staff, what you want to do is reach out to that organization and send the organization your resume,
not the church,
not in reference to that job, because the church that was like the church where I was ordained, where I served for a couple of years, when we ended up here in Safety Harbor, we were kind of praying about what God had next for us, and there was a position at the church that we were at in Texas that we were like, ooh, is God calling us back to Texas? And I called the senior pastor, who's still a good friend of mine, and he said, ooh, Andrew, this is so awkward, but we signed a contract with Vanderbloemen that we would not conduct any of these conversations. It has to go through them. And so I was like, oh, well, okay. So I applied through Vanderbloemen, but then because I had applied to that position, Vanderbloemen could not send my resume to any other church that was looking until I was already a no for that position. And it ended up that they wanted someone who a little bit younger and a little bit cheaper. And so it worked, it didn't work out, but it was the guy at Vanderbloemen, I think his name is Danny, who I met with. It was awesome. He was a Disney person. So Vanderbloemen paid my mileage for me to drive over to Disney for the day. I was like, oh, okay, that's great. And he was just saying that it's tricky because sometimes they'll have a resume where someone is perfect for another job that they have, but because someone applied directly for the one specific job that they wanted, instead of sending their resume to the organization as a whole, that resume is held by that one job until it is a yes or a no for that one job. So send your resume to chemistry staffing, Slingshot Group, Vanderbloemen, as a just kind of generic, here is my resume.
I'm a candidate.
I'm a candidate. These are the types of jobs that I'm looking for, not I want that job.
Think of it like when you're buying a house. You can go on Zillow and look at houses, but when you actually work with a real estate agent, they know about houses that you can't see on Zillow, and they can also tell you things about those houses that you can't tell from Zillow. It's the same thing. It's like chemistry staffing. You might apply for a church you see online, but they remember like, hey, actually, you're a better candidate for this. Also, if you go through the interview process and it doesn't work out, they'll ask you, would you like to continue to be in the system if other churches pop up? You say yes, and then they'll do that from there. Let's go to the next question. The title of this is the 3 quotes to buy expensive stuff. Is there a process in your church when purchasing expensive items? For example, buying a TV above $5,000, which is the most expensive
That's
TV.
the most that better be like an LED wall if you're paying $5,000.
Tim's got like 5 of those in his church. What do you mean?
He just bought a new one too. Yeah.
It's like 1,500. Yeah.
A church deacon mentioned that the church should operate like a company, requiring 3 quotes before making such purchases. Does your church have a similar process? Also, wouldn't it be quite a hassle to obtain 3 quotes for everything? Jeff or Delmar, what do you guys got?
If we have to buy something expensive, I generally just shoot it on up the chain, say, hey, I feel like we need to get this. And they're like, okay, shop it out and do it. So there's the size of the church sometimes really impacts this process. A church is, we're kind of medium church right now. And right now our process is still in the sense of if you need it, go get it as long as it fits in the budget. If it is a big ticket item, then what I do is I really have to crunch the budget. I get quotes. That's my personality. I'm not the kind of guy who's not going to get some quotes. It's not that hard. There's websites who'll do it for you. Now, if you need something built in your church and you have to get people to come out and give you quotes in that way, that can be a little bit more of a hassle. Generally, if it's at that level, I have an elder working with me. One of the things I did, I was very intentional about on my leadership teams and students, and now I'm working with kids as well. I want to have an elder serving on one of those teams. So I don't have to go to my elder board and set up a meeting and say, hey, we need to get these quotes. I got an elder serving with me and students. If he's signing off on stuff, we're good to go. I'm also an elder, but it's good to have an external elder. So that's what we do. We don't really have a process. I was in a church where it was a bigger church, and if we had to get something that costs a lot, I had to go to the executive pastor and just be like, hey, can you sign off on this thing saying I can buy it? If we did that, then not. Sometimes I understand the frustration because you are in your ministry and you know what you need, but now you have to convince this executive pastor who doesn't know what you need that you need to spend money on this thing you need. That is a real struggle, and I get that. So, but I'll let that up to you guys because I know Frank's probably had to deal with that as well.
Yeah, for us right now, there isn't like a set policy. Actually, reading this question made me think, well, we should probably have a actual policy. There is kind of a understood spoken policy that if it's over a couple $100, for in a small church, I just directly talk to the treasurer. But there have been times when I've had to go around that. There was a piece of audio equipment that broke recently, and I found one on Facebook Marketplace for like less than half of the price because another church had bought it and didn't need it anymore. And I just pulled the trigger and did it, and then had a conversation with my treasurer after. And he wasn't mad, but he was like, if you can let me know beforehand, that'd be great. Because for us, $900 is a good chunk of change. But like I said, I bought basically like a $2,000 piece of equipment for a little less than half. So, and we had to have it, or service wasn't going to happen the next week. So, but I would just say for a small church, having a good relationship with the treasurer and being as absolutely transparent and open as you can be about money is your best policy. Just like, don't make it weird. Don't make it like taboo. Just make it as open as you can. And so fairly consistently, I'm filling out like a spreadsheet of what things are and why they got purchased. And almost it's like a repeating pattern of the same stuff over and over. But like today, I'm having a conversation with some of our nursery workers about like, hey, we need we have more babies now, so we're using the infant nursery. We'd love to get a speaker in there. And I'm like, a speaker? I mean, TVs are so cheap now. Why don't we just throw a couple TVs in there, for like a 32-inch or 44-inch TV? It's like not even $200 to get a couple of them. So let's just do that. So that's the kind of thing where I would just like text my treasurer and just say, hey, this is a need that's come up because we're growing a little bit. Is this something I can just go ahead and take care of?
So we do have an official policy at Lakeview. It has been policy since before I got to Lakeview, and we've talked about tweaking it and changing it, but it's actually been really healthy. It's been good for us as a staff to hold us accountable, as well as for our treasurer to know how the money's being spent. So anything over $500 requires elder approval at Lakeview. So that's just blanket across the board. Whether you're a staff, you're a ministry leader, there's a great need for something, it has to get elder approval. So if it's over $500, so a couple weeks ago I needed a new laptop for a staff member. It was like $800-900. Send it to the elders. It's usually within a day I'll hear back whether it's a go. And then for best practices, yeah, I do 3 quotes. That no one requires me to submit those quotes. But for example, when we were getting our parking lot redone, we had a quote come in and we were moving forward with it. And we had 2 staff members push back and say, hey, can we please get a few more quotes? This is a lot of money. So then we got 2 more quotes and we ended up saving $18,000. So sure, it could be a hassle to obtain 3 quotes, but if we're talking about being good stewards of the resources that God has given us, yeah, I think you should probably get a couple quotes to make sure it's the best bang for your buck. I mean, Jeff said he found a great deal. Had he not done some research, he would have just went out and bought the thing brand new. But because he looked around and got an even better one, that's saving money. So I'm all for multiple quotes. I would say get a policy in place. That way it's not wishy-washy. So we as a staff, everybody knows, hey, anything over 500, whatever that's for, we have to get elder approval for that. And that's been really helpful for us, and it's held us accountable.
I think the 3 bids make sense if you're getting a concrete, or if you're getting asphalt, if you're getting a new roof or whatever. If you're getting, a new TV to hang in the nursery, a 32-inch TV is going to be under two. I mean, again, that's
But you're going to do a
$200.
Google search.
Under
Yeah,
100,
the
dude.
best.
Yeah.
But yeah,
You're gonna
that's
see
the
what's
thing.
the
We
best
don't
price,
live
right?
We don't live in an era where we need to get quotes for everything. We can
Yeah.
Google stuff.
It's like the TV that the 3 of us are looking at right now. It was hey, I can have this put in the back of the car at Best Buy and have it here today, or I can order one for $40 cheaper on Amazon. We got to deal with shipping. Someone has to be here to sign for it because it's a big package. Sometimes your time is worth more than the $40 or $50 that you're going to save, and part of that stewardship is stewarding your time well too.
But the
And
point
so
is,
again,
you're still putting in the work to
yes,
find the best
but again, it's
deal.
have a policy and stick to that policy.
Yeah, I don't think when I hear this question, I almost think if you have an item that's $5,000 and it's your church
$5,000 is a big expenditure for
I don't care
most
what size
churches.
church you are.
Why-
That's a lot of money.
why wouldn't you want to get, like, I remember when I was doing summer camps or missions trips, and I was ordering shirts. And like, I would love to be loyal to a singular t-shirt company. This is previous to us learning about church merch.
Merch for your church?
And any other organization, I would be like, hey, I want to order this many shirts from this many, this design. Who give me the best deal? And I would get 3 or 4 quotes. Then I would consider like quality and stuff like that. But like, I would get quotes for like a couple $100, just because, kind of like Jeff said though, like we could just Google that and like we can kind of figure it out pretty quickly. So I would say like, yeah, it might be a little bit of a hassle, but like, this is a part of being good stewards, and this will all be worth it at the end. So, hey,
Delmar's got something.
Delmar,
Yeah,
talk
I
to
just want
us.
Yeah,
Tell
I
us
just
what
want
you
to
do.
add that one thing. Loyalty is not always your friend when it comes to purchasing things. Sometimes you can say, I'm going to be with this group, and then over the years, they're gradually increasing the price, and you don't realize it. I learned that. Some of you are going to say, you idiot, which is fine. But I've been with the same insurance company since when I got my permit, just because I was just there
You
and I
idiot.
stayed.
You
Yeah,
idiot.
I know. And then I got my homeowner's insurance in, and they jacked it up $1,000 this year. So a friend of mine had left that insurance company, and I went and talked to him last week. And just in my own life, I saved $1,000 and got a $200,000 greater policy on my house, just because I shopped around. And I think I just would encourage you. One of the reasons some people don't like shopping around and getting other quotes is because they're already loyal to something else. Yeah, it's a very big, dangerous thing because companies, they're in it to make money. So I would just encourage you, if you don't want to get quotes, I think one of y'all said why, and there may be an ulterior motive behind it. So, or
And most of those companies don't
yeah.
really care about your loyalty.
honestly,
No.
they don't. Insurance people
They-
don't care at all.
They don't.
Yeah.
We had the church I was at previously, someone had donated a house right across the street to the church, and the church was selling it, and there was these, and we got multiple bids from different realtors, and the middle of the 3 commission bids was from someone who had been a longtime member of the church, and it was the better realtor with the more active listings, and the more high volume realtor. And it was, do we go with the person that's more likely to sell the house faster, but will expect a little bit higher commission? This is before the recent realtor shakeup that's happened. And so, or do we go with the person that we're going to be client number 1, but they also haven't sold a house in the past 3 months? And so we went with the commission that was going to be a little bit higher commission in hopes that the money would come in sooner. And she ended up writing off the entire commission. So she got the commission because then for her tithe and her tax records, she could do it that way. So sometimes it helps when you know a person as well. But it was a thing where she didn't tell us that was going to happen. It was this is a trustworthy person, and it might be worth spending an extra 0.5% to get the better person. So there's things that you consider as well. I know that's selling something, not buying something, but sometimes brand loyalty is worth it if it's the person that you can trust. If it's an insurance company, just run.
This is good. Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back next week. But if you haven't done so, join our Facebook group, like and subscribe. Find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram, Practically Pastoring. And we will see you next week. Until next time, I'm Frank Gill.
I'm Jeff Simpson.
I'm Delmar Pete.
I'm Andrew Larson.
And I'm Timothy Miller.
This is Practically Pastoring. Bye.